The sky had forgotten its color long ago. Once, two suns had burned there, one golden, one pale blue, casting twin shadows across the forests of Urel. Now only a single dim light flickered through the planet's thinning atmosphere, filtered through ash storms that howled like the dead. The ground was cracked, the soil bleached white and coarse as bone dust. Each gust of wind carried the scent of metal and decay, as if the world itself were rusting from the inside out. Kira walked through the ruins with a hollow container in her hands, searching for water where there was none left to find. Every day she left before dawn, though dawn no longer meant anything. Linya, her younger sister, would lie beneath the half-collapsed roof of their shelter, her breaths shallow, her skin a pale green fading toward gray. The children of Urel were born fragile now, their bodies unable to bear the hunger that had become the planet's inheritance. Kira always promised she would return before the light dimmed, and every night she did, though what she brought home was never enough. A scrap of dried protein moss. A ration tube from an abandoned outpost. Sometimes, only silence. Tonight the storms were heavier, thick with static and violet lightning. The air shimmered faintly, as if the sky were a giant wound refusing to close. Kira crouched beside an ancient water collector, one of the old machines from before the collapse. Its casing was corroded, the panels cracked, but she pressed her hand to the surface anyway. The machine whined weakly to life. A few drops of liquid gathered in its basin, reflecting her face, sharp, gaunt, eyes too large for the hollow beneath them. She collected every drop in her container, whispering to the machine like a priestess speaking to a forgotten god. When she returned, Linya was awake. Her small form trembled under the woven fabric Kira had scavenged from wreckage years ago. Her eyes, the same luminescent silver as the moons that no longer rose, looked up at her sister with quiet hunger. "Did you find anything?" Linya asked. Kira nodded, forcing a smile. "Enough to keep you strong." She poured the water slowly, drop by drop, into a cracked bowl. Linya's hands shook as she lifted it. The sound of her drinking was soft, like rain that existed only in memory. Kira sat beside her, her fingers brushing the girl's hair, feeling the brittle strands. "Tell me about the old days," Linya whispered. "When the sky still sang." Kira hesitated. The stories felt like lies now, but Linya needed them as much as she needed food. So Kira spoke, of floating cities and crystal rivers, of harvest fields that glowed under twin suns. She told her that Urel's heart had once pulsed with life, that their people had traded songs with the stars themselves. Linya smiled faintly, her eyelids fluttering. "Will it ever come back?" she asked. Kira couldn't answer. Later, when Linya slept, Kira stepped outside again. The horizon pulsed with artificial light, the faint gleam of orbital stations drifting above, where the wealthy and powerful had fled centuries ago. Sometimes their ships descended, their metallic hulls slicing through the smog. They came not to help, but to harvest what was left, metals, relics, sometimes even people. There were whispers of the trade guilds, those who bartered flesh for food across the interstellar corridors. She had always despised them. But hunger, she had learned, could twist even hatred into temptation. Her wrist terminal flickered weakly as she activated it, its interface cracked and sputtering. The data feed connected for only a moment, long enough to catch fragments of transmissions from orbit. Trade routes reactivated, human sector clearance granted, transport authorized, the words glowed coldly in alien script. Kira stared until the light burned into her retinas. The humans. Ancient myths among her people. Wanderers who had once fought their own extinction on a dying world, only to return stronger. The guild said the humans paid well. Too well. No one knew what they did with those they bought. She returned inside, her mind heavy with the weight of the decision she didn't want to make. Linya stirred in her sleep, murmuring her sister's name. Kira sat beside her, tracing the lines of her fragile face. She remembered their mother's voice before the sickness took her, whispering that love was sacred because it made survival bearable. But what was love worth if it could not feed the one you loved? The storms outside intensified, shaking the walls. The old metal beams groaned like creatures in pain. Kira pressed her forehead to the cold floor, trying to steady her breath. In the dim light of their shelter, she saw the small ration pouch that held their last protein bar, barely enough for a single bite. She broke it in two and placed half beside Linya's hand. The other half she held without eating. Hours passed before she rose. She stepped outside once more and looked toward the distant glow of the trade hub rising over the dead plains like a false sunrise. Her heart beat painfully in her chest. There were no good choices left, only the illusion of them. When the wind shifted, carrying the metallic tang of ship fuel and electric storms, she whispered, "Forgive me." Then she began walking toward the light. The trade hub was a wound in the sky. It hovered above the dead plains like a colossal insect of glass and metal, its underside webbed with docks that glowed crimson against the endless dusk. Kira had never been so close to something that still pulsed with power. The hum of its graviton engines resonated through the soles of her boots as she approached the shuttle gate, the sound deep and alive, as though the structure itself breathed. She had walked for 2 days and nights without stopping. Her water had run out halfway through the journey, and her legs had carried her only by force of will. Each step was a silent negotiation with despair. The closer she came, the clearer the details became, the drones that hovered like silver insects, the guards wrapped in polymer armor, the scent of ozone and sterilized air. The world of Yrel felt smaller beneath it, stripped of dignity, its children left to beg at the feet of the stars. At the checkpoint, an automaton scanned her, its lens flashing in shades of amber. Its voice was mechanical but eerily soft. Identify purpose of arrival. Kira swallowed, her throat dry as ash. Trade. The automaton paused, then nodded. You are malnourished. Biological readings indicate stress. Proceed to the registration deck. The platform rose beneath her, lifting her toward the belly of the station. She had never seen such technology up close. Transparent floors showed the planetary wasteland far below, its horizon warped by heat and distance. She felt weightless and filthy at once, a creature dragged from the mud into a place not meant for her kind. The registration deck was filled with noise, voices of hundreds of species, the rhythmic hiss of air filters, the hum of machinery processing endless deals. Screens displayed exchange rates for rations, minerals, labor. Every few seconds, a figure was escorted through one of the illuminated corridors, and the next in line stepped forward. Kira's turn came too soon. A clerk with translucent skin and eyes like frozen water gestured her closer. Species origin, he asked. Yrel, she said quietly. Yrel, he looked up from his hollow slate, studying her with faint pity. We don't see many survivors from there anymore. What's your offering? She hesitated. The words felt poisonous in her mouth. Myself. The clerk barely blinked. Terms. Enough food for 1, maybe 2 cycles. I have a sister. Designation of sale. Temporary, Kira said quickly. If possible. He gave a small, bureaucratic shrug. The guild decides. Not me. His fingers moved swiftly across the slate, and a glowing symbol appeared on her forearm, a digital sigil marking her as registered trade property. She felt the faint warmth of it seep into her skin, pulsing with quiet humiliation. They led her into a chamber that smelled faintly of oil and antiseptic. Other beings stood there, silent, waiting to be examined. Some looked resigned, others empty. Kira tried not to look at them, tried not to feel the weight of her decision press deeper into her chest. She told herself this was not surrender, this was survival. Time lost its shape in that room. Eventually, she was called forward. A human stood at the far end of the chamber, tall and broad-shouldered, his skin pale beneath the harsh light. He wore no armor, no insignia, only a dark coat that seemed too plain for this place. When his eyes met hers, Kira froze. They were not cruel. They were not curious. They were searching. The clerk's voice broke the silence. This one is strong-bodied, adaptive physiology. Minimal disease markers. Origin, Urel, Class 3 labor potential. Bidding starts at. I'll pay the asking rate, the human interrupted. His voice was calm, almost disinterested. The clerk blinked, surprised but pleased, and nodded. The transaction completed with a chime. Kira waited for the order that would come next, the command to kneel, to obey, to serve. Instead, the human turned to her and said, "Come." She followed him through corridors that curved like veins through the station. The floor vibrated beneath her feet, resonating with the heartbeat of machinery. They entered a docking tunnel where a ship awaited, sleek, black, and silent, its hull marked with faded Earth script. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Kira stepped inside. The moment the door sealed behind them, she braced herself. But instead of chains or commands, she heard the sound of a kettle boiling. The scent that followed was alien and intoxicating, warm, rich, almost sweet. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward a narrow table. He poured a steaming liquid into a metal cup and slid it toward her. "Drink slowly." She stared at it, uncertain. "You bought me," she said flatly. "I paid the guild to release you," he corrected. "There's a difference." Kira frowned. "You expect me to believe that?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Believe what you like. You're free to leave whenever you want." She almost laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "There's nowhere to go." "Then stay," he said simply. Kira lifted the cup and took a small sip. The warmth spread through her like liquid fire. For a moment she felt human, though she wasn't. She watched him carefully. "What's your name?" "Eric Vale." "Why me?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because someone has to remember what mercy looks like." The ship shifted, breaking orbit. Through the viewport, Urel grew smaller, its cracked surface fading into the darkness. Kira watched it disappear until only a faint pulse of blue light remained, the last heartbeat of a dying world. Eric's voice was low, steady. "We'll be heading to the outer rim. There's food there. And maybe a future, if you want one." Kira turned to him, unsure whether to believe or hate him. The taste of warmth lingered on her tongue, and the sound of the engines filled the silence between them. Somewhere deep within her, something fragile stirred, not hope, not yet, but the ghost of it. The Eidolon moved through the void like a dark seed adrift in infinite night. Its hull was lined with scars, carbon burns from battles long forgotten. Yet inside, it was quiet, a serenity built from the hum of engines and the faint, rhythmic pulse of life support systems. Kira wandered its narrow corridors, her fingers brushing cold alloy walls as she walked. Everything gleamed with a human precision that felt both alien and comforting. Eric had given her a small cabin, a room no larger than a storage pod, but clean, warm, and hers. The first night she slept in the softness of real fabric, her body trembled with confusion. For years she had dreamed of escape from Urel's hunger, but not like this. Freedom without understanding felt heavier than slavery. In the ship's central chamber, Eric worked among machines she didn't recognize, glowing panels, transparent cylinders filled with bioluminescent liquid, shelves of crystalline data shards humming faintly. Sometimes he spoke to them as though they could hear. Other times, he sat in silence, eyes fixed on a holographic star map. Kira watched him from the threshold. "You talk to your machines," she said. Eric didn't look up. "They listen better than most people." She stepped closer, curiosity overriding her caution. "What are you doing?" He pointed at the map. It displayed a network of faint, fractured lines stretching from the human core worlds to the edges of alien space. "Trying to find what's left of the green zones. Planets where we can still grow life." The guild's maps are censored. Grow life? Kira repeated, her voice bitter. Our world is dying. Nothing grows there anymore. Eric finally met her gaze. Then we'll teach it how to live again. She wanted to laugh, to tell him that Yrel was beyond saving. But there was something in his voice, not arrogance, not pity, but conviction. Humans, she realized, carried their defiance like a weapon. They had burned their own world once and rebuilt it from ash. Perhaps that was why they frightened so many civilizations. Later, he brought her to the hydroponic bay, a vast chamber filled with rows of transparent tubes. Inside them floated roots and vines, glowing faintly with soft emerald light. Earth crops, he said. Modified for low-oxygen atmospheres. They feed on carbon and heat. We can plant them anywhere if we stabilize the soil. Kira reached out, her palm pressing to the glass. The vine inside pulsed against her touch, reacting to her biofield. It's alive. That's the point. She turned to him. Why show me this? Because you're going to need to know, he said simply. Your planet isn't dead, Kira. It's starving. There's a difference. She wanted to argue, but her throat tightened. The thought of Linya's hollow eyes flashed before her. Even if that's true, I can't go back. I sold myself to save her. If she's still alive, the guild won't let me near her. Eric leaned against a console, folding his arms. The guild isn't as powerful as it wants you to believe. They survive on fear and dependency. Break those, and their empire crumbles. Kira frowned. You sound like someone who's fought them before. I have, he said quietly. Humans fought each other once, governments, corporations, trade houses. We tore our own planet apart. But we learned something after almost destroying ourselves. Control only lasts as long as people believe they need it. His words settled deep in her, a strange warmth beneath the cold layers of disbelief. Days passed aboard the Eidolon. Kira learned how to monitor oxygen levels, recycle air, and synthesize nutrients from waste compounds. She studied the plants, their slow, patient way of breathing. Eric taught her to calibrate energy cells, to fix small drones that buzzed like metallic insects through the corridors. She began to understand the rhythm of the ship, the way its heart beat in perfect unity with the stars. At night, she dreamed of Yrel's cracked soil softening beneath her fingers. One cycle later, Eric called her to the command deck. The view through the glass canopy stole her breath, a nebula unfurling in luminous spirals of blue and crimson, like a living organism stretched across eternity. That's the Red Veil, Eric said. Beyond it lies the Rim Cluster. Some call it the Graveyard of Worlds. She tilted her head. You plan to take us through that? He smiled faintly. That's the only way to reach Yrel undetected. Her heart stuttered. You're taking me back. You didn't think I rescued you just to hide among the stars, did you? You wanted food for your sister. I'm giving you more than that. The Eidolon entered the nebula. The colors outside shifted in fluid waves, bathing the cabin in shifting light. The ship's sensors screamed as radiation surged, but Eric adjusted the stabilizers calmly, hands steady on the controls. Humans learned to survive worse, he murmured. When the turbulence passed, Kira stared at him. You risked your life for a world that isn't yours. Why? He didn't answer immediately. The light from the nebula reflected in his eyes like twin flames. Because once, someone did the same for me. And because if we don't help each other, what's the point of surviving at all? Kira looked out at the endless expanse, where dead stars burned faintly like ghosts. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like one of them. Something inside her, the part that had been numb since her planet began to die, began to stir again. When the ship finally broke through the red veil, Yrel appeared ahead, a faint sphere wrapped in gray storms. Kira pressed her hand against the glass, her pulse quickening. Eric's voice was soft behind her. Let's bring your world back to life. And for the first time, Kira believed he might actually mean it. The first light that touched Jor-El in decades was not sunlight but the flare of descent thrusters. The Eidolon pierced the cloud layer like a burning arrow, scattering the dust storms below into spirals of colorless mist. Through the viewport, Kira saw the planet's surface unroll beneath them, a tapestry of ruin, bone-white deserts, and the faint shimmer of cities swallowed by sand. The sight hollowed her chest, yet she could not look away. This was home, but it looked like the memory of a corpse. Eric's hands moved across the flight console, steady and precise. Landing coordinates set. Atmospheric pressures low but stable enough for short exposure. Kira watched the sensor readings flicker, her eyes catching on one red pulse among the readings. That's my region, she whispered. The southern quarter. The beacon's still transmitting. Eric nodded. Then someone's alive down there. The ship descended into the valley where Kira had been born, though now it was only shadow and silence. The ruins of old towers jutted from the sand like ribs of a long-dead creature. The Eidolon settled beside a fractured ridge, its engines releasing a final sigh before shutting down. For a moment, there was no sound except the faint wind brushing against the hull. When the hatch opened, the air struck Kira's lungs with the acrid taste of dust and corrosion. She stepped out carefully, her boots sinking slightly into the fine powder that used to be soil. The gravity felt heavier here, as if the planet resented their return. The beacon's signal led them to a half-collapsed shelter. Its walls were blackened from storms, its door sealed with fused metal. Kira's heart thudded painfully as she pressed her hand against it. The lock resisted, then yielded under Eric's plasma cutter with a hiss. Inside, the darkness stirred. A faint, fragile voice called out, "Kira." She froze. The sound was older but unmistakable. Linya emerged from the shadows, her frame thin but alive, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. For a heartbeat the world stopped. Kira ran to her, falling to her knees, arms wrapping around her sister as if to keep her from fading. "You came back," Linya whispered. Kira's tears mixed with the dust on her face. "I told you I would." Eric stood by the doorway, silent, his gaze soft as he watched them. The moment stretched until it became sacred. Then, quietly, he began unloading equipment from the ship, cylindrical pods filled with living seeds, nutrient filters, microreactors. He moved with the precision of someone who had rebuilt worlds before. They began work as the storm front gathered on the horizon. Eric taught them how to install the soil stabilizers, devices that pulsed low-frequency vibrations to rebind the planet's molecular structure. Kira followed his instructions, hands trembling as she buried the first seed capsule into the fractured ground. The capsule opened with a faint glow, its filaments unfurling like veins of light through the dust. Within minutes, the surrounding soil darkened, richened, and pulsed faintly with color. Linya gasped. "It's breathing." Eric smiled faintly. "It's hungry. Let's feed it." They worked for hours. The storm swept over them, shrouding the valley in crimson haze. Lightning crackled across the horizon, illuminating their figures like ghosts reborn. By nightfall, the barren ground shimmered faintly under bioluminescent tendrils that spread outward like living rivers. Kira watched in silence, or written across her face. "It's working," she whispered. "You did it." Eric shook his head. "You did. I just reminded your world how to listen." Days turned into cycles. The soil reclaimers expanded their reach, forming green clusters that pushed against the wasteland. The Eidolon's drones swarmed overhead, dispersing nutrient mist into the atmosphere. From the nearby settlements, figures began to appear, gaunt, fearful, drawn by rumors of growth in a place long dead. They came hesitantly at first, speaking in broken dialects, their faces hollowed by famine. Kira greeted them, offered them food, showed them the gardens blooming in the ash. They stared in disbelief, some weeping openly. How? They asked. Kira looked toward Eric, who was kneeling beside a hydro unit, his hands stained with soil. He showed us what humans call surviving, she said softly. And he taught us that no one owns life, it's something we build together. Word spread faster than light. Traders whispered of Yrel reborn, of an alien world healed by human hands. But not everyone welcomed the rumor. The trade guilds heard, and their response was swift. Their drones began to appear at the edges of the atmosphere, dark specks against the sky, scanning and transmitting data. Eric intercepted one of the transmissions. They'll come, he said grimly. They can't allow this to exist. A self-sufficient world means an end to their power. Kira's jaw tightened. Let them come. This time, we won't bow. Together, they fortified the settlements. Eric fused human tech with Yrel's ancient bioengineering, creating defenses that lived and adapted. Vines reinforced with carbon fibers grew into living walls. Seed drones formed canopy shields that absorbed energy blasts and converted them into nutrients. Every attack the guild prepared would feed the planet they sought to destroy. At night, Kira and Linya stood by the growing fields. The stars reflected in their eyes, no longer distant, but watching. Linya whispered, he gave us back the sky. Kira glanced toward the ship where Eric worked tirelessly, his silhouette framed by artificial light. No, she murmured. He just reminded us we could take it. When dawn came, the first of the guild's ships entered orbit, dark and silent as vultures. The air shimmered under their descent. Kira felt fear rise in her chest, but beneath it was something stronger, a pulse that matched the rhythm of Yrel's reborn soil. This time, her world would not die quietly. The sky fractured into fire. The guild's ships broke through the upper atmosphere in waves, their black holes streaked with electric blue plasma, their descent burning lines across the heavens. Kira stood among the new fields that had once been barren dust, watching as the first bombardments began. The shock waves rippled through the air, bending the horizon, sending tremors deep into the revived soil. The vines around her reacted instinctively, hardening, weaving themselves into armor that shimmered with bioelectric light. Eric's voice came through the comm link, steady despite the chaos. They're testing our defenses. Keep the stabilizers online. If they target the reactors, we lose the entire energy grid. Kira sprinted through the thickening air toward the central generator, a towering spire of metal intertwined with living roots. Every step she took left glowing prints on the ground as the planet's biosphere resonated with her heartbeat. Yrel itself seemed awake now, aware, pulsing with a life it hadn't known in centuries. The air was thick with ionized mist, the scent of ozone mixed with something earthy and electric. Linya met her at the generator's base, her face streaked with dirt but her eyes blazing with purpose. The western field's shield is weakening, she said. We can reroute power from the northern grid, but it'll drain the reserves. Kira nodded. Do it. If they breach the west, they'll hit the seed vault next. The two sisters worked side by side, their hands moving through holographic interfaces that pulsed with organic light. The stabilizers responded, the planet's defenses flexing and reshaping themselves. Above, the first guild drones descended, sleek, serpentine constructs that fired beams of coherent plasma toward the surface. The beams struck the fields and were absorbed by the living shield canopy, spreading into veins of molten color that snaked outward like rivers of light. Eric's voice cut through again. Kira, they've deployed ground units. 3 squads moving from the North Ridge. I'll intercept. She froze for a heartbeat. Alone? Not alone, he replied. The planet's on our side now. She caught a glimpse of him through the haze, a dark figure moving across the ravaged plain, flanked by drones that followed his gestures like obedient creatures. The human exosuit he wore shimmered faintly, adapting to the shifting radiation. Plasma bolts struck the ground around him, but he moved with purpose, returning fire with bursts of concentrated energy from wrist-mounted emitters. When the first guild mech broke through the dust, towering over him, he didn't retreat. He placed a small device on the ground and whispered, "Wake up." The soil responded. From beneath the surface, massive roots erupted, wrapping around the mech's legs, crushing its armor with wet, organic strength. The machine screamed, a metallic shriek swallowed by the earth itself. Kira watched, awe and fear mixing in her chest. Eric wasn't fighting for Yrel anymore. He was fighting with it. The battle stretched through the night. Explosions painted the darkness in shifting colors, like a storm of creation and destruction intertwined. The guild ships tried to overwhelm the defenses, but the planet adapted faster than they could calculate. Every weapon they fired was absorbed, recycled, reimagined. The air hummed with alien intelligence, Yrel's consciousness merging with Eric's neural network through the stabilizers. But the cost was growing. The feedback energy surged through Eric's body, visible as faint arcs of light crawling across his skin. He staggered once, gripping his chest as his neural link overloaded. Kira's voice reached him through the static. "Eric, disconnect. You're burning out your interface." He didn't answer. Instead, he rerouted the link, amplifying the planetary pulse. The ground itself began to glow beneath his feet, the heartbeat of an entire world thundering in sync with his own. "This is what freedom costs," he murmured. The guild's flagship descended then, a monstrous vessel shaped like an obsidian spear. Its shadow engulfed the valley. Kira saw it through the energy haze and felt terror twist her gut. The ship's main weapon began to charge, a sunbright sphere forming at its core. The planet's defenses wouldn't withstand it. She turned toward Eric's last signal and ran, her comlink filled with static, her voice breaking. "Eric. They'll destroy everything. You have to stop." His reply came faintly, distorted. "That's the idea." She found him at the epicenter of the growing storm. The air around him crackled with energy so dense it distorted vision. His neural interface was fully active, threads of living light connecting him to the soil, the vines, the sky itself. He looked at her and smiled, the first true smile she had seen since the day he found her. "Kira," he said softly. "Take your sister. Get to the vault. Whatever happens next, don't look back. Don't you dare." But before she could finish, the ground shuddered. A surge of pure energy erupted from beneath them, a column of blue-white fire that reached into the heavens. The flagship's weapon discharged at the same moment, colliding with the planetary burst. The result was not an explosion but a transformation. The energy spread through Yrel's atmosphere, merging with the bioluminescent fields and living defenses. The entire planet flared with light, then stabilized. When the glow faded, the guild's fleet was gone, dissolved into dust and vapor. The weapon had consumed itself. Kira awoke hours later beneath a soft, green sky. The air was warm, clean, alive. Vines hung from the cliffs, flowers bloomed where ash once lay, and water trickled through the newly formed rivers. Linya knelt beside her, tears streaking her face. "Where's Eric?" Kira whispered. Linya pointed toward the horizon. The Eidolon stood there, silent, half-merged with the landscape, its hull covered in living roots. Kira stumbled toward it, her steps unsteady. In the center of the field where he had stood, there was no body, only a single crystal of radiant blue light, pulsing slowly in rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. Eric had not died. He had become part of Yrel, its guardian, its core, its will. Kira sank to her knees, pressing her hand to the soil. It pulsed beneath her palm, warm and steady. His voice echoed faintly in her mind, calm and distant. "You wanted to feed your world. Now it will never starve again." And for the first time since the suns had faded, Yrel was truly alive. Seasons began to return to Yrel. Where once there had been endless cold and cracked stone, now oceans shimmered with translucent algae, forests breathed in layered blues and silvers, and twin moons rose over fields dense with radiant grain. Kira stood on a high plateau, the wind threading through her silver hair as she watched the horizon ripple with auroras. The planet hummed faintly underfoot, a living rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. It was Eric's rhythm. She could still feel him in every pulse of the soil, every tremor of the roots that connected the land. Linya approached quietly, her once fragile frame now strong, her eyes reflecting the soft green light that danced through the atmosphere. "The guild hasn't returned," she said, gazing toward the stars. "Our scanners show their networks collapsing. Trade routes have gone silent." Kira nodded, her gaze distant. "They won't come back. Their system runs on control, and Uriel broke that pattern. When a world learns to feed itself, it stops begging." Below them, the settlement had grown into a thriving network of biostructures woven from living fiber and recycled alloy. Human engineers and alien growers worked side by side, exchanging knowledge, shaping a culture neither one could have built alone. Children, both species, played beneath the shimmering trees that grew from soil Eric had once bled for. The air carried laughter instead of hunger. At the heart of the colony stood the Eidolon. No longer a worship, it had become a sanctuary. Its metallic hull glowed faintly with living veins of light that pulsed like arteries, connecting to the planet's surface. Within its central chamber, the crystalline core, Eric's final form, radiated a constant warmth. It powered the generators, stabilized the biosphere, and, in some ways, listened. Those who entered often swore they could hear a voice inside the hum, soft and human, asking simple things: "Are you well? Is the harvest strong?" Kira visited the chamber daily. She would sit by the core, resting her hand on the smooth surface, feeling the faint vibration of his consciousness beneath. "We did it," she whispered one day. "The guilds are gone. The colonies on the rim worlds are growing again. Your dream spread farther than you could imagine." The light within the crystal flickered, a slow, pulsing acknowledgement. "Linya's working with the Human Council now," Kira continued. "They're rewriting trade laws, ending ownership contracts. No more sales. No more cages." Her voice trembled slightly. "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" A faint shimmer passed through the room, and for a brief instant, she felt warmth brush her cheek, like the ghost of a hand. Outside, Uriel's orbit had stabilized. The second sun, thought long dead, began to pulse again in the distance, faint but alive. Eric's sacrifice had not only protected the world, it had rebalanced its star. Scientists from the Terran Union were still trying to understand how a living consciousness could interface with a planetary biosphere on that scale. They called it a miracle. Kira called it Eric. As the years unfolded, Uriel became the center of something new, a movement that reached across the systems. Worlds once stripped bare by greed began to heal. Human ships arrived carrying seeds, soil samples, and knowledge. Alien refugees brought culture, art, songs. The exchange grew into something vast and self-sustaining. And yet, amid that rebirth, Kira sometimes dreamed of him. In those dreams, she was back on the barren plains, her sister's hand in hers, staring at a human who had offered food instead of chains. She would wake with tears on her face, but they were not of sorrow, they were of memory. One twilight, she and Linya climbed to the ridge where the stars bent low enough to touch. They watched as transport ships shimmered through the atmosphere, their trails painting the night in gold. "Do you think he knew?" Linya asked softly. "That his choice would change everything?" Kira looked toward the horizon, where the auroras met the ocean. "He didn't hope for a monument," she said. "He just wanted us to eat. To live. That was enough." Linya smiled faintly. "Then he'd be proud." The wind carried the scent of new life, of flowering oxygen trees and ocean spray. Somewhere deep below, the planet's pulse quickened, a sound like the distant echo of laughter. Kira closed her eyes and listened. As the night deepened, she whispered to the air, "Rest now, Eric. We'll keep growing." The stars shimmered in response, their light bending gently toward the world that had once been forgotten. Centuries later, explorers from distant systems would find Yrel thriving, its sky painted in bands of living color. They would hear the tale of the alien girl who cried for food, of her sister who sold herself for love, and of the human who refused to own what could never be possessed. And in the deepest chambers of the planet, where light met life, a faint heartbeat would continue, the eternal rhythm of a world reborn. In the end, no monument bore Eric's name. No statue, no archive. Only the fields that glowed beneath twin suns, the laughter of those who ate without fear, and the endless whisper that traveled through the soil. Freedom is not given. It's grown. And Yrel, once a dead stone adrift in a dying system, became the seed of a new dawn, not through conquest or technology, but through compassion vast enough to rewire the stars themselves.